screen starts glowing and the film starts rolling. You wanna be knowing what you might be in for. So give the show a listen and find out what you're missing. Put yourself in position for the easy good score.
Happy holidays, everybody. Welcome to The Goods, a film podcast, here for episode 233. This is Brian talking to you over the airwaves. How you doing, Dan?
Hey, Brian. I am doing very well, but it's not just episode 233. It's episode 6 of a wonderful tradition here on The Goods.
That's right. So we just had our first snowstorm of the year in the area. So the flakes are fresh on the ground. And we're here, like we do every year, to talk about adaptations of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. But not just that. So, as Dan said, this is year number 6. And every year we've talked 4 adaptations. It's a pretty deep well of these things. And I want to talk about the process that pointed us to these adaptations specifically that we watched. But just to reflect for a moment, 5 years in the can. And we did 4 every year. So coming in this week, we had already watched and talked about 20 versions of A Christmas Carol, Dan. So what were some of the themes or broad types of adaptations we've talked?
So the first year we discussed musical Christmas carols. The next year we discussed mostly straight dramatic interpretations. We've also done TV episodes. We've done modernized retellings. I feel like I'm missing one.
We did the one that was like plain, unflavored. It was the dramatic adaptations. Maybe you said that.
Yeah. But what was the last one?
We did one that was licensed characters.
Oh, that was the last one, because we had 2 separate ones. One was TV episodes and one was licensed characters. That's what it was.
Gotcha. But we got to last year, number 5, and we were both kind of thinking, do we keep doing this? Is there fresh ground to cover? Is this a worthwhile endeavor? Why do we keep coming back? Should we keep coming back? And so I spent the year thinking about that and wasn't really clear on an answer. Of course, listeners will know I'm always one to default to tradition, so maybe it's no surprise that we're here again. But I was really scratching my head for a little while. And like a few weeks ago, as I was kind of gestating this concept of what are we going to do this week? What are we going to watch? I was in kind of a bleak headspace. And there were a few reasons for this. But I was really thinking about, like, where is my life at right now? And where is it going? And where can it go? Because I just wrapped up this graduate program, 3-year MFA, coming to a close. And I'm working on putting the finishing touches on my film. And I don't know how different my life is now than it was 3 years ago. Like, in many ways, I feel like I'm in the same place. Like, I went to a wedding for somebody from the program, and I was just thinking about, what is next? Where am I at? These people they're scattering to the wind in much the way that the people that I knew in my previous round of college were. And I'm just thinking, okay, well, what is next for me? And in this headspace, I was thinking about, well, there's 2 ways that you can really look at it. And one is with what they call on the internet a doomer mindset, and one is a bloomer mindset. So I saw a meme earlier this year where somebody wrote, "I'm thinking of beginning it all." And I thought that's the message of A Christmas Carol, right? Is that with whatever time you got left, you're reassessing, you're resetting, and you're looking forward with a positive outlook. And you're thinking of beginning it all. And that called to mind for me, It's a Wonderful Life, which is a movie that we've talked about some on the pod, quite a bit off the pod, because it's one of Dan's favorites. And to metagame for a moment, rare that either one of us will pick one of the other's favorite movies for an episode topic, because the way that we structure it is that whoever assigns the film or films for the week is kind of in the pilot seat, operating the steering wheel, and talking most of the time. I mean, I think we break it down pretty evenly, but there's a person who's like the host for that episode when they pick the film. So I definitely want to give Dan lots of floor time, because our official selection, our predominant selection for this week, is It's a Wonderful Life from Frank Capra in 1946, which is one that also deals with themes of redemption and reevaluation of oneself at Christmas time. And I definitely want to hear Dan's thoughts on why he has previously brought that into the conversation when it comes to A Christmas Carol. But that's not all we watched, listeners. I thought it wouldn't be authentic, it wouldn't be the goods if we didn't watch It's a Christmas Carol. I don't know why I said It's a Christmas Carol. I guess I'm thinking It's a Wonderful Life.
It's Christmas, Carol.
It's Christmas, Carol. I had that on the brain because of a movie we're going to be watching next week. But yes, what I did is I decided in this dark humor vein to play Christmas Carol roulette, where I loaded 115 Christmas Carol adaptations into the chamber and we spun the revolver around, and we've each been tasked to watch 2 Christmas Carol adaptations. So I thought that was fair. 1 feature film and then 2 additional Christmas Carol adaptations, which may or may not be features. A lot of them were TV episodes or shorts or various things, but it was everything else on Ben Stanley's master list, plus the rest of the TV episodes I was considering last year. Total of 115, which means, everybody, that if we cover 4 a year, we've got at least 29 more years where we're good to go on these.
Oh, man. By the way, Ben Stanley, I assume if you're listening to episode 233, you probably are familiar with the goods lore at this point, but Ben Stanley is the man who's watched 130 Christmas carols or something like that. He's probably even higher than that at this point.
He's the subject matter expert.
Yeah, we had him on the pod to talk about his experience binging every single adaptation of A Christmas Carol that he could find.
And so shall we talk about the specific Christmas carols that we each watched? Since we watched different ones, I think we're going to kind of be doing like little book reports.
Yeah, sure. This should be good. So shall I dive in first?
Yeah, let me know. What was the first one that the Wheel of Fate assigned you?
Yes, it's called Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, and it's from 2012. Notable because that is the year that It's Christmas Carol came out. If you search A Christmas Carol 2012, 2 results pop up. It's Christmas Carol and this version of A Christmas Carol. It only has I think a couple hundred logs on Letterboxd, which is very low for that site. So it's not one that's been widely seen. It is on YouTube, free streaming. I wouldn't be surprised if it's on Tubi or something like that. It's a dollar store level production by this Irish company called October 11 Pictures Limited. Is October 11 the day when Israel was attacked, Brian?
That was October 7th.
Okay.
I don't know the significance of October 11th. Sometimes I think it's Columbus Day, but I don't know what they're going for.
Does it have Irish significance?
I don't think so.
If it had been the day, I couldn't remember the day there was a terrorist attack in Israel. That would have been an unfortunate name for a production company, but October 11, I don't know.
I read this year that Columbus Day is the National Day of Spain. It's like their 4th of July.
Huh. That's interesting. I didn't know that. Anyways, this is a company based in Ireland. I didn't really read too much about them. I suspect it's tightly aligned with a small number of creators. In fact, it could even just be this guy. I'm not sure. But this carol is adapted by a filmmaker named Jason Figgis, Figgis. I assume he's an Irish guy. He wrote it, Well, when I say wrote it, obviously Charles Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol, but he adapted the screenplay. He directed it, he produced it, he edited it, he shot it as cinematographer. So it's a real bootstrapped production here. And I did not like this at all, Brian. I thought it was bad. This company mostly makes horror films. If you look at their other productions, you can just tell this guy Jason Figgis, like his DNA in filmmaking is just dirt cheap horror movies. Because this whole thing has kind of like a grime, a glaze of like cheap horror. And well, let me just say a little more about what this does specifically. So it does kind of tint it on the horror elements a little bit more, which could be like a pitch. Like I'm going to make the horror It's a Christmas Carol. Like things like that have been done, of course, but if you're going to go down that path, you're like, that's going to be my spin. But also, he made it very close to the book. Like, it includes stuff from the book that you don't often see adapted, both in like narration, but also in what's depicted. The one that really caught my eye, and Ben Stanley brought up that he always likes it when this gets adapted. It's the ignorance and want scene, which is basically it's like you see a ghost or something like that.
Well, it's the two skeletal children clinging under the robes of present.
Oh, so it's present. Okay, gotcha. So I remembered it was like, yeah, these two things that kind of emerged during the Christmas present. I couldn't remember if it was present or it was some other figure that we saw the two things emerged out of. But it's these little creepy figures that come out of, I guess, yeah, Ghost of Christmas Present that have thematic significance in the story. But most adaptations cut this scene because, frankly, you can hit everything that the thrust of the story needs without it, you know? But I think kind of the reason he called it Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol is because he was really trying to keep it close to the Dickens. And I don't know, that's kind of cool. Like that's another spin you can come at, is like try to capture it as much verisimilitude to the story as you can. But it's just dirt cheap production. Like, how do you make A Christmas Carol boring? I don't know. It's like the least boring story. There's ghosts and lost love and time travel and flying and coming of conscience. It's like everything's cinematic and dramatic and wonderful to watch on screen. But this is just a really dull. You know, I don't like to pick on filmmakers just out there doing a thing, but I also feel if you're going to not have a budget and make a movie on pennies, you got to have an angle. Pick something, whether it's like a visual identifier or like something in the writing or like some way to make yourself stand out and take advantage of your strengths. Don't lean into your weaknesses, you know? And so I've been thinking about some low budget movies that I've seen, and this is an example of doing it wrong because it just tries to be A Christmas Carol, but like doing everything not very well. It's like I feel like you got to pick some angle if you're going to come in without the full resources. So I just watched this movie with my wife called Metropolitan, written and directed by Whit Stillman, a Canadian filmmaker who's kind of got a cult following. It's not too often you hear of Dancore style filmmakers who have cult following. Normally it's like weird genre makers. But this guy, he kind of makes erudite, talky movies about young adults that are kind of loosey-goosey in the plot. Have you seen any Whit Stillman movies, Brian?
It doesn't ring a bell for me.
Okay, so Metropolitan, came out in 1990. It takes place in, I think, the 70s. These young adults in New York who are wealthy. They're basically like reckoning with it's mostly just a comedy, but it also is like this reckoning of these interesting ideas from this very specific moment in time and group in time. Wealthy young adults in New York City going to debutante balls. It's like, I don't know. I've never seen anything quite like that before. I could guess what some of the thoughts would be, but that's just like a very interesting thing, captured very precisely in the language and the rhythms of their talking, the way that they speak. And it's just delightful. But it's made for pennies, you know? And so they don't show the balls. They show them leaving for them and then coming away from them because he didn't have any money to shoot a ball, you know? And it really works. It's not a perfect movie, but it's a delightful movie.
Would you say it was well observed?
I wouldn't call that well observed because it's a comedy. I usually use that for dramas, but that is a good callback. It's in that essence.
In a recent episode, you said that about a movie may not be good, but it could be well observed, and I've been trying to think about what that could mean.
Okay, so another example is Skinamarink. Okay, so maybe you like what Skinamarink does, maybe you don't like what Skinamarink does, but undoubtedly they took a small budget and said, we're going to tell a story a very specific way with the flavor that we want to have in the story when we make this movie. And I think that's admirable. And I thought it kind of worked, and I thought it kind of didn't, because it didn't have enough meat on its bone to be 100 minutes long. But it was at least like something I had never seen before, and I appreciated that. I compare that to this movie, for example, where they just tried to do everything, but just did it all cheaply and badly. Another one I saw is this movie called It Takes Three. Came out in 2021. It stars Jared Gilman, who is the star of Moonrise Kingdom and hasn't been in too many different things. It also has Mikey Madison, like a year after she appeared in the Hollywood movie, the Tarantino movie, and then obviously a couple years before she won Best Actress. It's like everything that I thought I would like in a movie. It's like a Cyrano riff in high school where two best friends fall in love, starring Jared Gilman and Mikey Madison. I was like, that's just sounds like it's got so much flavor. But it executed everything badly rather than finding a really unique in on the story. I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, if you're an indie filmmaker, find a way to do your own vision, your own voice, something that can't be done by someone who has budget, or rather something that you're not inhibited from by your lack of budget, I guess is what I mean.
Yeah, I think I agree. I hung out with Jared Gilman for a weekend. He came to the William and Mary Film Festival in like 2012.
Whoa, really?
Yeah, so I'll drop some pictures in the Discord of me hanging out with Jared Gilman.
That's awesome. I love Moonrise Kingdom.
I love Moonrise Kingdom too.
He's a fun Twitter follow too. He's very candid. Well, just one or two more thoughts on this one. I know I've already kind of rambled on long here. Everybody just looked like a person wearing a theater costume. Like, they talk about iPhone face, you know? Like, if you're in a period piece and you look at someone, you're like, I just look at that person and I know they know what an iPhone is. And everybody in this movie had iPhone face, even though 2012, I don't even know if the iPhone had, I guess it had come out then, but the equivalent of that. They looked like modern people. The furniture looked like it came from IKEA, so it wasn't like I was sucked into the past. The pacing is so weird because it hits the Christmas yet to come, and I'm pretty sure it calls it Ghost of Things Yet to Come. That maybe that's what Dickens says, but that just doesn't sound quite right. Ghost of Things Yet to Come.
Okay, so this is sounding like After Last Christmas to me.
But anyways, the Ghost of Christmas Future is barely halfway into the runtime. So, oh, and then one thing that bugged me, I always like that we never hear what Scrooge says when he whispers in the people collecting the donations. He's like, oh, and here's how much I'm going to donate. You don't hear what it is. He says it in years, and it's like, wow, whatever it was some imaginable amount because of the way his face changes. But I don't need to have the like, that doesn't sound like a lot of money. But I guess it was for the time experience that I have whenever I watch movies from the 40s or 50s or whatever, including It's a Wonderful Life, which we'll talk about. Like, where I'm doing like inflation calculations in my head. I just want to know that it's a lot of money.
I assume that's why Dan sent me the thing partway through. We were both scrambling to watch It's a Wonderful Life before we recorded today, because the way it turned out is the episodes are closer together than they normally are. But he said $5,000. They act like $5,000 is a lot of money. I still think $5,000 is a lot of money, Dan. But
oh, that was exactly my point on that one. Is like that line feels like it could have been written in 2025, and It's a Wonderful Life. Jimmy Stewart says, you know how long it takes a working man to save $5,000? I was like, yeah, you're a good point, Jimmy Stewart. It does take a working man 75 years later, or however long it is.
So they future-proofed that one a little bit.
Yeah, but in this A Christmas Carol, you hear him whisper, he says, and here's how much I'll give you, 5,000 pounds. And I was like, I don't want to hear the dollar amount. Don't tell me what the dollar amount is. And so now I was like estimating, well, like 5,000, that is a lot of money, but how much was it in the Christmas Carol times? And also, how rich actually is Scrooge, you know? We've talked about that in the past.
Yeah,
so.
it's a good question. I think he's not as rich as Scrooge McDuck in DuckTales. He doesn't have a money
No.
pool. He's just a small business owner. I've actually been reading articles this week about the exchange rate or the inflation adjusted rate that Bob Cratchit was earning, because the book tells us 15 shillings a week. And I read one estimate that that's like $43,000 a year now. So still, there's people earning less than that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we live at a time of unprecedented income inequality. Some people would love to have a steady income of $43,000 a year.
So shall I talk about the first version that I watched?
Yeah.
Okay. So I also didn't like the first one that I watched. It was called Carry On Christmas from 1969, and it is a Christmas special from England in the 60s. From what I've been able to gather, Carry On ... was a series of comedy films, British comedy films, produced from like the late 50s up through the 70s, and they made 31 features as well as 4 Christmas TV specials. So it's the British film series with the most installments. James Bond has been going longer, but it has fewer installments. Still to this day. And so it's like everyone pretty much starts the title with carry on something. It's like carry on nurse, carry on soldier. And I would guess it's an allusion to Keep Calm and Carry On, the World War II Britain posters that you could get varieties of at the dorm poster sale in college. Such and Carry On. Well, this is Carry On and such. And 1969 brought us Carry On Christmas. This is barely a Christmas Carol adaptation. It has the framework of a Christmas Carol adaptation because we're introduced to Scrooge, and then the ghosts come and they say, we're going to show you people who have suffered because of your stinginess. Like, I guess Scrooge withheld loans to these people or foreclosed on payments they were making, called in their dues, and so their lives were harder. But the first act, so each of the acts is like a little story that's pretty much completely separate from A Christmas Carol. And the first story is Frankenstein and Dracula.
Everyone's favorite Christmas icons.
And so for 15 minutes of this like 45-minute thing, it's Frankenstein and Dracula. And Dracula works for Dr. Frankenstein, which any horror fan would tell you anytime you got the two of them together, it's supposed to be the other way around, that you've got the Frankenstein monster working for Dracula, because Dracula has the mind powers and stuff, the like seduction and willpower, and the monster's a big brute. The monster's hardly in this. It's Dracula working as a lackey for Dr. Frankenstein. And the style of this, the patter, it's all these ribald jokes. It's just constantly making like horny innuendos. And then there'll be like a 10-second joke and then like 20 seconds of laugh track. And it was so obnoxious. I was tired of this by like 5 minutes in.
Wow. Not up Brian's alley. So how do you like British humor in general, Brian?
It varies. Like, I can kind of see how Monty Python came out of this same milieu. The one I was thinking of that I don't know super well, but I think is around this time, is Benny Hill. So it kind of made me think of Benny Hill. I mean, I don't know. I think sometimes it works for me, sometimes it doesn't, and I may not have the cultural trappings to appreciate it fully. We talked about that a little bit recently, where you're watching something and it's like, oh, this seems to come from a different culture than I'm familiar with.
Yeah. I'm kind of with you. I had mostly had a low hit rate on British humor recently. Like sometimes it just feels really mean, but hold that thought because I have a follow-up on that.
So the second act with the Ghost of Christmas Present is all about Elizabeth Barrett Browning and her husband Robert Browning, who were poets. That's all I know about them. I don't know if they have a larger degree of cultural clout and awareness in England. But this whole like 15 minutes is about the romance between the Brownings. And it wasn't like they did a Gift of the Magi thing or anything like that. it was just a lot more of these horny jokes. So then the final piece of it, the last third of the trifecta, was a telling of Cinderella.
This doesn't sound Christmas Carol at all.
We're not doing any Christmas Carol, basically. But I guess Scrooge learns to be less mean, but not any less horny. Still, he's a randy old man. They didn't play the sax music like in Benny Hill. I thought that was a missed opportunity. I think that adds a lot.
Yeah.
So yes, not my favorite. I think when we get to the end of the 4 that we watched, we should do a quick rattle off the ratings.
Right. So should I go to my next one?
Please.
So mine was also a British sketch comedy, more of a sitcom. Well, I think the show is a sketch comedy, but this one plays kind of like a sitcom because it's a single story. It's 45 minutes, so it would be an hour on TV. It's called Nan's Christmas Carol, from the British TV show The Catherine Tate Show, which Wikipedia calls a sketch comedy. I think she has like different characters kind of that she does. And Nan, I think, was like one of the, what I'm gathering based on the fact that she got the Christmas Carol, and then I think she subsequently got a spin-off show as one of the more breakout characters from the show. But she's basically Catherine Tate, who was, I think, probably in her 40s, maybe 30s. I don't know when she was making this. I don't even remember what year it came out. I want to say it was like 2012 or something like. Oh no, 2012 was the other one I watched.
Was this one 2009?
That sounds right. Yes, 2009. She later appeared on The Office for some episodes. She was one of the people they tried to like make the new Michael Scott, and none of them really ever landed. I don't even think I've seen every episode of The Office, but they had trouble with their identity after Steve Carell left. Anyways, the premise of this is we have this kind of crotchety old British lady. And I'll just say I really like this. I was skeptical going in, both because I found British humor hit or miss. And I don't know, we've had like comic reinventions that just haven't worked for me of A Christmas Carol. But this was very funny, and I felt like it hit the emotional arc in just the right amount to make it be worth doing A Christmas Carol while still not compromising its nature as a sitcom or as a sketch comedy show. The premise is basically that the Cratchits are like some remote family, like old distant cousins that are coming to visit her in her little apartment. And she's just grumpy. She's like, I don't want anybody in my house during Christmas. But this whole time she's like making lots of jokes, and some of it I didn't get, but like in a way that sort of amused me. Like she had a lot of jokes about what she called Northerners, and I was not familiar with any of these stereotypes. What is a Northerner? Does that mean someone from Northern, like England, and there's stereotypes about them being hicks? Or is it there's like a specific Northern Ireland connotation maybe? I don't know. But the gist seemed to be that they were uncultured hicks, and it was kind of funny. The whole thing, it was just making me laugh a lot. Like the joke hit rate is very high, particularly even as it's like exploring the Christmas Carol stuff. So Marley is her deceased husband, comes back, and he floats out and wakes her up in the middle of the night, and they start by bickering because he's dressed in what they buried him in. So it's like a tuxedo, and he's like holding a ukulele, and he's mad. He's like, why did you bury me with a ukulele? I don't like playing the ukulele. And then like, and this suit makes me look so bad. Why would you choose this to be the suit that you buried me in? And so they're going back and forth. And then he's like, well, 3 ghosts are going to visit you. You got to realize what you're doing. And she's like, 3 ghosts. So you plus 2 others. No. 3 ghosts, not including me. It's like, okay, so it's 4 ghosts. Well, no, but it's going to be 3. Like thematically, it's got to be 3 ghosts, you know? And I like that. It was lampshading the much debated point when you say, how many ghosts is Scrooge visited by? And you'll usually see the people say, oh, he's 3 ghosts, Christmas past, Christmas present, and Christmas yet to come. But really, it's 4 ghosts. And you could even argue even more than that, because he like sees other ghosts when he peeks out the window or whatever. Or I forget how does he peek and see the ghosts in the book?
No, that's exactly right. Is Marley like gestures to the window and he looks out there and there's a bunch more ghosts out there doing the Marley thing. And usually that's it. Usually he just looks out there and sees that there's more. So I could defend those not really being characters.
Yeah.
In Scrooge 1970, you get a little more of those because Marley flies him out the window and sings a little menacing song about all the ghosts out there. So some play it up a little more.
Speaking of which, I'll just throw this in here. The day after Thanksgiving, or maybe it was the Saturday after Thanksgiving, so 2 days after Thanksgiving, we spent like the entire day at my in-laws, my wife's parents, and I enjoy my in-laws very much. There's a stereotype that people don't like their in-laws, but I get along very well with Katie's parents and her siblings. But that was still like a lot of time out of my personal space where I have like the things that I do when I get bored or when I need to step away. So I didn't have anything to do. Like we didn't have the TV on. We were just kind of chatting and stuff. The kids were playing with toys, and they had just pulled out their Christmas stuff. And apparently they had a copy, and it was a pretty nice copy of A Christmas Carol. So I spent like, I don't know, an hour reading the first half-ish of A Christmas Carol. So maybe it was more than an hour. And I had forgotten it's like written like a comedy. It's like it's very funny. There's lots of quips in it. More than you might expect if you're thinking of the spooky ghosts and all that. He's got like a snarky reply to everything. Scrooge does.
And even Dickens has like little asides.
Yeah. Oh yeah. His little observations, little witticisms. So anyways, there's like all sorts of little spins. Like whoever wrote it actually knew A Christmas Carol very well and like has lots of little riffs on it. Like, oh, Tiny Tim dying is a dog. And because because she threw the family out of the apartment, they're forced to eat chips for Christmas dinner, and the dog Tiny Tim eats a chip and chokes to death on it. I don't know. All this is just executed with like some dark humor, but like not obnoxiously so. Just kind of like, how we were joking about in Roseanne when we talked about the Roseanne, how it was kind of charming, how she was kind of an asshole the whole time. And like she kind of had to rediscover her vivacity for being an asshole to everybody. So it was like an inversion of it. This is kind of like that, although it still ends on a like she needs to embrace everyone point. Oh, and they have another one where that really made me laugh. That's a reference to A Christmas Carol, when on Christmas morning she wakes up and she opens the window and she says, "What day is it?" And it's Christmas. Like, go down to the poulterers and buy the finest goose. What's a poulterer? It's like a butcher that specializes in birds. It's Christmas. Everything's closed. Like, well, what's open? The grocery store. Or no, it's the convenience store. Well, go to the convenience store and get the best goose they have. They're not going to have goose at a convenience store. And this whole banter was making me laugh quite a bit. So I was really enjoying this. And one last shout out. It features in the background a Christmas song entitled "I Wish It Could Be Christmas Every Day" by the glam rock band Wizard, Wizzard. And I love this song. It's one of my favorite Christmas songs. I was like really feeling it when they were playing that song in the background. So yeah, that's Nan's Christmas Carol from the Catherine Tate Show, which I enjoyed.
Cool. Yeah, it looks like Catherine Tate was Nellie on The Office, which, is that right? Or am I mixing it up?
No, I think that's right. That sounds right.
Yeah.
Not the most beloved character. Yeah.
I thought The Office picked up in the last couple episodes, but yeah, the back couple seasons not the best, but it finishes stronger than you might think. So I also liked the second Christmas Carol I watched better. From the roulette, I drew Ebenezer from 1998. This was a TV movie that is a Western. So we had a horror movie this year. We had two comedies and now a Western. And this was from 1998. It was a Canadian production. And Jack Palance stars as Scrooge. And in this Western reimagining, Scrooge is a gambler and he owns a saloon. So we were literally on the Discord just talking about, have we watched any movies with gamblers? Because we just now talked Hard Eight, and that was a gambler film. Now here is another gambler. I also think Gunslinger had some gambling going on. Support your local gunslinger. Jack Palance has a really good voice. So he was like an old man by 1998, as Scrooge often is, but he's just got this deep, almost like Clint Eastwood voice. And the story opens with him winning everything that a young man has in a poker game. This guy named Sam, he just like loses his whole life savings and his land and his horse to Scrooge in this poker game. And then Jack Palance is like, well, it was fair and square. Sam, the young man, storms off, swearing revenge. Bob Cratchit is Scrooge's like dweeby barkeep. He's behind the counter at the saloon. He's got glasses. And in the aftermath of this poker game, he finds evidence that Scrooge is a cheater. He's got like secret compartments in his card table that he can pull aces out of. So basically everything that Scrooge has got, he's gotten by undercutting people and cheating and not caring about the needs of others. So this is like a really nasty, bad Scrooge. Like even beyond the bounds of what it usually is. He's like actively cheating people and just not following good business practices, even just beyond being selfish.
Because that's part of Scrooge's thing is like we have social institutions and order for a reason. You usually see him like counting coins and being precise.
Yeah, like he's just playing by the rules as they stand.
Exactly. Yeah.
But no, this guy's really nasty. And so his partner, whose name is Marlowe instead of Marley.
Okay.
I don't like that as much as Marsley from the Jetsons. But Marlowe was the previous saloon owner, and I guess Scrooge cheated him out of ownership of the saloon, which also leaves Marlowe's daughter, who was the young man's fiance from the start. So she's Sam's fiance, she's Marley's daughter, and she's like disinherited because now Scrooge has taken ownership of this saloon. There is some interesting incorporation of the Western tropes in this film. So once the ghosts start showing up, the ghost of Christmas Past is an Indian woman, a Native American. And so they're talking about like the concept of spirits as it pertained to the natives. And it's kind of interesting. The ghost of Christmas Present they call a sheriff, which, yeah, I expect to see a sheriff in a Western town like Sheriff Woody. Except this is where I knew it was a Canadian production because the sheriff rides in and he's got the whole Dudley Do-Right, just like shockingly red uniform.
That ain't right.
The sheriff is here. And then when we get to the Ghost of Christmas Future, he shows that what's going to happen is a shootout in the street between Scrooge and Sam.
Oh, I kind of like that.
Yeah, every Western's got to build to a shootout. It reminded me of Back to the Future 3 because, like, you know that this shootout is going to happen and somebody's going to die. And the way that Future shows it is that Scrooge is the better marksman. So normally you see Scrooge die, but it's like, well, Scrooge is going to kill this young dude who's not competent with a gun and just like totally complete his trajectory to being a bad dude. Like Scrooge is going to be as bad as possible when we get to the future because he's going to be a full-out murderer. And then the dodge, the way to transform and avoid that fate is just to say, actually, I'm not going to fight you. My bad, I cheated. And also, Marley's daughter can have the saloon. And so that ends up how it goes. But also, I think Scrooge gives Bob Cratchit a raise, which I don't know how he does that if he doesn't own the saloon anymore.
I've increased your salary, and also now somebody else is paying it for you.
Giving you a strongly worded letter of recommendation. I do like that there's a beat where the town hesitates to embrace transformed Scrooge because it's like this is not a very good dude, and he just suddenly walks into the town square wearing Santa Claus clothes, and they're like, "What?" But then there's this recurring carol that they sing throughout the film, and he starts into singing this song, and the town kind of gradually warms to him. And I actually really liked the ending.
Huh.
So I thought overall this was decent. I was glad I watched it. So are we ready to rate this year's slate?
Sure. So is it good as our signature section where we give each Christmas carol a rating on our 8-point goodness scale? ranging from very not good, which is a 1 out of 8, to our masterpiece rating, toward a good, 8 out of 8. I guess I'll go first. The Charles Dickens A Christmas Carol from 2012. As mentioned, I was not fond of this. It kind of hits the floor for what a Christmas Carol storytelling can be. That's like very straight. Like I said, horror tinted. He does a couple of cool things with it's actually like front loaded when he's like first encountering Marley. And there's like these images of, I think he's thinking of Belle, or is that her name in the book? I can't remember.
That's right.
And it's kind of almost like a montagey bits. And there's a thing where he sees like a mirror in an interesting composition. Which is not horrible, but in this, it's digitally shot and edited. And he being the filmmaker in this case, applies what I can only call the crispified visual filter. Like if you've ever seen crispy or deep fried memes online that has sort of like a fake increase of like the not the sharpness, maybe the sharpness, I don't know. Like it just looks very fake, and like somebody pulled up a movie editor and like just was messing around with the dials in there, and it does not look good. And maybe threw on some digital effects too. Pretty ugly film. I'm gonna give this a lower end 2, not good. The only reason it's saved is because there's a couple of moments where the horror filmmaking is interesting, and I always like to see a very faithful Dickens adaptation. What about you, Brian, for Carry On Christmas?
Nice. I'm going to give Carry On Christmas a 1. I was just very confused why it existed and why I was here watching it. I don't know. Maybe I need to watch more of the series to get it, but I don't know if that would help. 15 minutes of Dracula and Frankenstein, hardly a Christmas Carol make. I tried to take a step back and appreciate it for what it was, but I just didn't.
It sounds like they just had these 3 ideas of things they wanted to do, and they're like, well, it's Christmas time, so let's throw in a Christmas framing story or something like that. I don't know.
It really increased my appreciation for Rich Little's Christmas Carol.
Because that one really does make it Christmassy. Christmas caroling.
That was the one that was, an hour of one guy doing impressions, playing every part, doing impressions that some of them were relevant in the 70s. Many of them were already outdated by the 70s.
Right. And then I guess that brings me to Nan's Christmas Carol, which, as I mentioned, I was very fond of. I'm going to just let this one eke into a 6 out of 8. Very good, which would actually probably put it in like my top 10 Christmas carols. I don't think I've given more than 10 a very good, but I was very charmed by it. It's the funniest comic interpretation of A Christmas Carol I've seen. It hits the story in a pretty sturdy way. It doesn't outstay its welcome, but it also hits all the beats that it's got to hit at a reasonable pace. I just laughed a lot at it. And then I did feel like it kind of earned its ending. I was hovering at a high 5, and then the ending I thought did a good job of like pivoting from comic to dramatic without feeling like a cop-out. So I recommend that one. I don't know anything about like what this character or the show, so there may have been bits of context that I missed, and certainly not all. I didn't know all the references in the like cultural reference humor. Also threw me off. It felt like a primetime sitcom on network TV for most of its run, but that had some F-bombs in there. It's like you wouldn't see that in American TV. So I don't know if it's just different standards or what, but soft, just eking into 6. Very good on that one.
Nice.
And what about you, Brian?
So for 1998's Ebenezer, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 8, a good-ish. I was glad I watched it. I'm glad that they made it. It does a good job of being both a Western and a Christmas Carol adaptation. Still very much a TV movie, like it doesn't have the biggest budget. But yeah, I mean, good holiday fare. Maybe it almost verges into 5, but I think I'm going to keep it in 4 based on other things I've rated in the past. If you are one who dives deep with the Christmas Carol adaptations, I'd say check it out.
All right. Does that bring us to the main event, Brian?
I think it does, Dan. And so let's talk about It's a Wonderful Life from Frank Capra, 1946. So I know you've got a background with this film.
Yeah. It's one that I kind of grew up with. I was talking with Mitch, who was on the podcast last week. We were talking about something unrelated. It was related to music, actually. And he was talking about how he grew up and like his movies were just kind of part of like how he viewed the world when he was young. It was like very formative to his outlook and perception of the world. Like when you're young, you often perceive life through the lens of the pop culture that's important to you. And for him, that was movies. For me, that was not movies when I was a kid. For me, that was music when I was a kid. Music was just extremely important to me. So, like, for me, it having been on when I was a kid doesn't necessarily make it a nostalgic favorite. I mean, obviously, there are exceptions. We've talked about movies I loved when I was a kid and still love. And some of my all time favorites are movies that I fell in love with when I was a kid. Not to say I didn't love movies when I was a kid, but the point being, this was a movie that was around for me, but like I wasn't really latched onto. So I kind of always knew the story and the beats. And then as I got a little bit older and it really started to get more into movies, I rewatched this and it just like bowled me over when every time I watched it, like a wrecking ball emotionally to me. It almost felt cliche to call it a favorite. It's one of those movies that just like everybody knows. So can you really call it a favorite if it's like everybody knows it, you know? But the more times I watched it, the more that I had to admit that it really was just for me, regardless of what it meant to anyone else, for me, it was a movie that I cherished and one of my favorites. I have logged it 3 times, including this week, since I got my Letterboxd account in 2020. But what about you, Brian? What was your experience with this one?
Cool. I don't know if anybody follows me that intently on Letterboxd, but I don't re-log things usually if I rewatch them. It's usually, if I check it off, it means that at some point in my life I have watched that movie.
But do you use the dated logging system or do you just click the I and make it watched?
I try not to use the date unless I am specifically writing a review,
Gotcha. Okay.
which I sometimes do, not all the time. But my past with It's a Wonderful Life is I hadn't watched it until I think like 2013 or 2014. So it was not part of my life growing up, other than I had heard about it because it gets constantly referenced. It's just like many TV shows talk about the, oh, I wish I had never been born hook. You know, different like cartoons have nods to it. Just seems like it's been in the zeitgeist. And it's interesting to learn that when this movie first came out, it was not a big success. And it's really the decades of TV airings that helped it become such an institution. Part of that was that it lapsed into the public domain, and then it has kind of been reclaimed, which I don't know exactly how that worked. It's possible that the studio found like a loophole or something of actually this is still on our books, that we do own this.
It's kind of funny how little things like that change the way that we view movies, you know? Like isn't that the thing with the zombie one, The Night of the Living Dead, that's part of why it became such an institution is like you could play it on TV and watch it anywhere because it was public domain.
Right.
And like, what if, I don't know, what if they had filed the paperwork correctly? Would we have the trope of I wish I hadn't been born? Would everybody know It's a Wonderful Life? I don't know.
Yeah, hard to say. And then in 2019, I went and visited some of my extended family in California for Christmas. And at my aunt's house, we watched It's a Wonderful Life. And that was the second time I saw it. And I think I appreciated it more that time. And then this is the third time that I watched it this week. But I do think highly of it. We'll get into why. By the way, I have 2 quick corrections to issue from recent past episodes. Meant to do this at the top of the hour. But first is recently I said that back in the day I read an article about Prince Harry being a helicopter pilot. I went to the archives and actually the article was about Prince William being a helicopter pilot, so I did want to correct that. Also, we talked minimalism in theater and how you have to strain credulity to accept some of the limitations of the stage. This was, what did we watch? Sweeney Todd. And how does like a movie adaptation of a stage show compare to the stage show itself? But I wanted to say this past week I've been watching clips from the SpongeBob musical from like 2016. Have you seen any of the SpongeBob musical, Dan?
Funny you should say that, Brian, because that I have an anecdote about this, which is that my daughters participate in a local kids theater program, and one thing they do is they take every semester, so twice a year, they take a play and they adapt it. It's usually like very loosely inspired by the source story, but it's like written in a way that works very well for younger kids. They did the SpongeBob musical a couple years ago. It was actually the last semester that my older daughter was in the youngest age group, and she got to play SpongeBob in it.
Wow.
So she was SpongeBob in a version of the SpongeBob musical. But the way they do it for the youngest group is every character appears in basically one scene. So the whole thing is they're searching for SpongeBob, but SpongeBob only appears in the last scene. So it's not like she had 100 lines. She just still only had like 10 lines, maybe more than like the average part. But it was still cool that she got to play the title character. I have a picture of me and her in her SpongeBob quote unquote costume, because they don't do costumes at the youngest level, but you can choose like hat and pants that match your character. So she has like a SpongeBob hat. So I'll post that on the Discord as well.
Okay, cool. Well, I was watching clips from this SpongeBob musical Broadway production, and the way the characters are depicted is they're humans. They're humans with just the slightest suggestion in their costume to tell you what character they are. So SpongeBob's got the suspenders and a tie and the pants and like a yellow shirt. And Mr. Krabs has claws. The best costume is Squidward, who has a pair of legs like taped onto the back of his real legs. So he's got 4 legs and the back pair faces backwards, and he was doing a funny dance. And Plankton has an eye patch to show that he's got one eye. But I loved it. It was really, really good. And just the minimalism worked to its advantage. So I've turned around. I've been visited by 3 minimalism ghosts in the past week, and I've reevaluated thanks to the SpongeBob musical circa 2017.
I'm imagining we saved the city meme, and it's like the city burning. We saved minimalism.
Also, I have a tendency to misuse genre appellations and like art movements. So who knows if you can really call the SpongeBob musical minimalism, but to me it was. He didn't have a whole like Times Square mascot suit. He was a dude. He was a dude with a tie and pants.
That's SpongeBob, baby.
But what are we here to talk about? It's a Wonderful Life. Now, the first time that I had watched this, because of all the buildup in like various, 20-minute sitcom episodes that borrow the hook, I thought the I Wish I Had Never Been Born would be more of the runtime. But really, you get to know George Bailey's life, like literally his whole life story. And then the angel doesn't show up on camera until like 30 minutes from the end of a 2-hour and 10-minute movie. And the wish isn't vocalized and set into motion until like 22 minutes from the end. But it stars Jimmy Stewart. So what are some other Jimmy Stewart movies, Dan? We've watched a couple.
Well, he has the privilege of having been in some of the greatest movies ever made. He was in Vertigo, and the one that we talked about is Rear Window he was in. But I think the default Jimmy Stewart performance, like what is the Jimmy Stewart character? Because he's a character who, or excuse me, he's an actor who, I mean, you'll often see listed as one of like the greatest and most beloved Hollywood actors ever. And I would agree with that assessment. I always love Jimmy Stewart and pretty much anything that he's in. He was one of these actors who cultivated a very specific type. Like he was playing Jimmy Stewart in every movie. And they say that about different actors nowadays. Like, oh, Samuel L. Jackson always plays Samuel L. Jackson, Jimmy Stewart is a tier above Samuel L. Jackson. No offense to him, but it's kind of a simple. Sorry.
Did you fall over? What happened?
No, I bumped something and then that caused me to trip and then that knocked over my drink. Sorry. It was a little comedy of errors.
Oh, wow. Dan is wearing a cool jacket today. What's on your jacket?
It is all the NBA teams. And I got this jacket for like $1 at one of the Goodwill stores where you pay by the pound. Have you ever been to one of those, Brian?
Oh, those are called the bins, the Goodwill bins.
Yes. Uh-huh. But okay, so Jimmy Stewart. Part of what made Jimmy Stewart great was later in his career, he played against type. So like Vertigo and Rear Window and a couple of others, like Rope, for example, those are all Hitchcocks, but those are mainly the later Stewarts that I've seen. Said, hey, what if this all-American guy has like a dark streak, has some demons in him that he can't purge, even when he's Jimmy Stewart on the outside, you know? But if you were going to say, like, what is the Jimmy Stewart persona? It's either It's a Wonderful Life or Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, another Capra flick. He's also in the one that You've Got Mail was remade into, The Shop Around the Corner, or wait, vice versa. That was remade into You've Got Mail. I think he was in a Ford movie, a great Ford movie, but I can't remember which one. But he had a productive career, you know?
Oh, for sure. And actually, he was in The Greatest Show on Earth, that circus movie
That's
that
right.
we watched.
He played the clown,
The
right?
clown with a dark past. But yeah, I was thinking that the iconic roles are, well, quite a few, but definitely Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, definitely this one, definitely Rear Window and Vertigo. So he was well known. He's got a really distinctive voice, almost to the point that it seems like put on. I don't know. Teddy does a good, funny Jimmy Stewart impersonation. He's really good in this, though. I mean, he's good across the board. And so let's talk about It's a Wonderful Life. When it kicks off, there are prayers being sent up to God and his angels, asking for intercession on behalf of George Bailey. This guy, George Bailey, please help George Bailey. And so the guardian angel, Clarence, gets tasked with this mission. But first, he has to think about George's whole life. We gotta go back to the beginning. We gotta see how the life unfolded.
And to your point about the runtime, like when you start thinking about the what would happen if I never have been born, you kind of need the buildup. Otherwise, that pitch doesn't work. Like it only works in contrast to something else.
Right. Yeah, I guess you have to see how things went the one way to then appreciate how they go the other way.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we get introduced to George pretty young, when he's like 10 or 11, and he's this ambitious, adventurous kid. He wants to, what does he say? I want to shake the dust of this crummy little town off my feet and see the world. That's what he's about. Is like, don't stay in the town your whole life. He wants to be a big figure. He feels big in the small pond and he wants to get out. And I wonder, Dan, if he succeeds on the path that he originally has planned, I think he would end up something like the Jimmy Stewart character in the other one we watched, Rear Window, where he's the globe-trotting photographer and he's dating Grace Kelly in the big city.
Right. Where he's very good at that and like revered for that. Yeah, that's interesting because this movie has a lot of like potential paths where things could have gone different. It's kind of a complicated story because ultimately it's about what if he wasn't there at all. But like we also, through the first hour and a half, see a whole bunch of mirror versions of what his life could have been in other characters. So, for example, what if he had gone to war? Well, we see his brother go to war and become a hero. And everybody's like, man, you know that George is just as brave and just as sharp as his brother. He could have been that war hero too. Well, what if he had gone to college? Well, he could have been the one on the ground floor of this factory, this new plastics that everybody's talking about. Yeah, I mean, the things that we learn about him are that he's very sharp, he's clever, he's always got a good joke, and he's charming.
Yeah, basically everybody likes him.
Yeah.
All the girls are chasing him around.
And he is ambitious, like you said. He's got wanderlust. He knows that there is much to this life, much to this world, and he wants to experience that. So he was like, I want to go to Europe. I want to go to Greece. I want to explore. Then I want to go to college. And then I want to go somewhere grand on a life adventure. And it does a good job of kind of showing this Although it does, we can talk about what some of the incidents are. Many times he's on the verge of doing something, and then like literally he's walking out of town, and he gets pulled back in.
Right. Yeah, we talked about in the episode on The Crowd how it feels like The Sims, and literally their names in that 1927 movie are The Sims. That's the family. But I was feeling that here too. It's like, geez, people keep taking the ladder out of George Bailey's swimming pool. It's like he can't catch a break. He's cursed. He's cursed to stay in the town. I don't really know what the saying "can't see the forest for the trees" means. I find that a confusing one, but I think it applies here because the message is that he's having more of an impact than he can appreciate. And that everybody has butterfly effect tendrils into other lives.
Right. And the gist of it is each one of those times he wants to go do something, he doesn't get to do it. He's stuck at home. The family business is a bank. And so here we're definitely getting a Christmas Carol parallels because we've talked in the past about like what is Scrooge's business, but the gist of it seems to be kind of like what George Bailey's business is, which is giving out mortgages to folks in town and letting them build houses and start businesses and such. In particular, they keep bringing up that he gives out mortgages to local people to build houses and get a little slice of that American dream. And yeah, when we see him growing up, you said he has this impact on everyone. So many of the early incidents we see from him growing up are some way that he did a small thing that had a huge impact on someone. So he, for example, rescued his brother from a freezing lake when they were sledding. He fell into a frozen lake and pulled him out. And if not for that, then the brother would have drowned in the icy lake. Or when he was working for someone local, it was like the pharmacist, and the pharmacist in a state of distress filled the medicine capsules for someone with poison. It had me wondering this time, why does a pharmacist have a big bottle that says poison on it? It seems like a recipe for this kind of mistake to be made. But anyways, he notices that he accidentally put poison in the capsules.
Oh, dang. That was my Tuesday poison order.
Instead of the actual medicine. And so he prevented, first of all, from this sick child from dying. And secondly, the way that we actually end up seeing it is basically preventing this pharmacist from ruining his own life because getting thrown in prison because he accidentally delivered poison as medicine. And the reason that the pharmacist is distressed is because a relative, I think it's his son, died from the flu recently. And I was trying to place, is this the Spanish flu?
It must be, because they say it's 1919, so...
Oh, okay, yeah.
Somewhere Pearl is going on.
That's a crossover I want to see. And then, yeah, we see other things like, oh, so like the big arc is that there's a big bank in town. And that big bank is owned by capitalism personified, Mr. Potter. And he is trying to buy up all of the real estate, give out these harsh loans, get people paying him rent and lots of fees, owning the land. And eventually we'll see in our contrafactual reality, somehow renaming the town after him. I don't think that's how town names work. You can't just say, hey, let's rename this town. I mean, I guess if you like control the town council, maybe you can.
Yeah. So the first time I saw it, I thought that was pretty dumb, pretty just beyond believability that the town is named after him, because it really gets into like Hell Valley, Back to the Future 2 territory when he wakes up in the dark town, the worst timeline. But then I thought about it, and it's like, well, actually, just about every town I've ever lived in has been named after a person. It's like Burke, that was Silas Burke, and Reston, that was what somebody's name is, R-E-S town.
Yep.
And Washington, that's a person. And like, even if you think about it, it's like the state of Maryland was Queen Mary, and what Virginia was for Queen Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen. And it's like everything comes down just about to being named for somebody.
But I think in each of those cases, they like acquired a land and established a settlement, a civilization there, and said, all right, this is named after this person. And that was just the name that people bought into for that place for since the founding. It's uncommon that there's a well-established name for a place, and then everybody's like, no, we're gonna change it to name it after a different rich guy, and that's just the name of this town now.
Well, Potter, he stirs a lot of pots.
I guess so.
Yeah. And so because Potter is dogging the steps of the Baileys and just has this insidious influence, George Bailey has to stick around to keep defying him. It's like his father dies, and so then George has to run the savings and loan. This little bank that they've got. George has to be the one to run it because he like makes this impassioned speech to the board of directors of why they shouldn't give in to Potter, why they shouldn't yield, and they're like, holy shit, George, you're right. You're the one with the vision, so you run the bank. He's like, oh, dag. That's not what I wanted to do, but maybe you have a point. So this whole thing, the message is life is what happens to you when you're busy making other plans. As John Lennon said, it's like life keeps coming, the years start coming and they don't stop coming. And George has to keep deferring his dream.
And I just want to say a couple things here. So one is you perceive this and witness this as it's happening, but it also is planting seeds that will pay off at the end. So you're going to kind of see, oh, it's obvious that he's having impact, that he's making this community better. But the extent to which he is really kind of builds up, accumulates as it goes, so that the aggregate sum of all of these you really appreciate by the end. And then another thing is much of this is framed like we'll see an episode and then we'll see some commentary on it from the angels, and we'll get to meet an angel personified by the end, so we're getting some commentary on it. But I like each one of these like almost all of them are just very charming vignettes, very interesting. Some of them are funny and some of them are warm and some of them have more dramatic heft to them, conflict. It's just really inviting as like a portraits, like scenes from this person's life. Like it is setting stuff up, but also each one kind of serves as like a charming little story in micro too.
Yeah. And George and Potter, they're both bankers, but they have kind of opposite approaches to business. George is all about raising people up, raising up the lower class by giving them a chance. And I think they're in a way both arguably capitalistic. I don't know. I mean, it's open to interpretation. They both use the American system to different ends. And it's like George is about investing in the entrepreneurs, the new people on the scene. Like he helps the Italian immigrants get started, start a business, buy a house. And it's like it is possible to be active in your community in a positive way financially, such that it's not just one person prospering, it's everybody prospering. Whereas Potter is always about undercutting everybody else only to his own enrichment. And it's like, you know, keep everybody downtrodden, keep everybody renting on a subscription model so that nobody owns anything and nobody has prosperity beyond Potter.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're kind of right. And it's almost like I don't necessarily like to over prescribe modern politics onto this story. I think if you think a little bit too much about it, it doesn't enrich the film. Like, oh, is it pro-capitalism or anti-capitalism? I mean, the point is that George is using the levers of modern society where money does rule things, which is already true in the 40s and is even more true today. But he's using that exactly what you just said, Brian, is that to be a productive member of society, you inevitably will deal with money. Money will be some of what you do. Nobody who is an active, productive member of society can get away from money. It's just, it is what it is. Like that is the oil of society, you know? And how do different people whose jobs are money deal with that? And we see that to very, very different ends with Potter and George.
Yes. I was thinking about another movie from not too much later than this that I think when it was originally released, it was called The Great Rupert. It's from 1950, and in subsequent releases, it's been retitled A Christmas Wish to kind of brand it as a seasonal film, even though it takes place over like a whole year. So I think they were just trying to make money off of something in the back catalog. But anyway, what this film is about, it stars Jimmy Durante, and it's about a family in a community. They have this windfall of money because they like rent an apartment from this wealthier landowner, and the landlord has money that he's made that he's squirreling away like in the attic of his house. He's just like storing it up in the walls because he's a miser. And then one day, like a squirrel is running around in the walls, a little literal squirrel. And Jimmy Durante finds like a panel comes loose on the wall, and there's all this money stored in the wall. He's like, "Oh, look what I found!" And he starts investing it in the community, and like, putting some money behind different business ideas and helping the people around him. And in the end of the story, it's like he ends up being the really rich one, really well connected, having this great life. And then when the rich miser guy goes to open up the panel, there's no money back there anymore. And he hasn't made any more connections, and he hasn't bettered the community, but Jimmy Durante's there to help him out. And so it's this idea of two different approaches to how do you think about money and how do you use money and what is it really for?
That sounds like an interesting movie. I'd like to see that. One thing that I think is controversial, and again, I don't like to overprescribe politics because I think you can make anything about politics. Politics is everything, everything is politics. But I've heard people say that Mr. Potter Capra was typically identified as conservative politically. I mean, I guess Hollywood's always been political, but like I feel like this was right around the time that what your politics were was becoming big news in Hollywood.
Yeah, the heading into the era of the blacklist. Not quite there, but it was like we finished up World War II and we're already on the cusp of the Cold War.
And Capra was kind of in the umbrella of those considered pretty conservative and therefore not really at risk of being communist or whatever. And so then as a result, people have said, well, Mr. Potter is clearly modeled after FDR. He looks a little bit like FDR.
He's got the wheelchair.
And he's got the wheelchair. That's the big thing that kind of ties him. When we get to present day, he has a wheelchair because Mr. Potter's there. He's like a senior businessman from when George is a kid. So he's got to be pretty old by the end, you know?
And they do some things to him to kind of age him up. It's like he has some hair early on and then he's completely bald and then he's got like a blanket over him in the chair.
Right. Potter is played by, is it Lionel Barrymore?
That sounds right.
I think it's one of the Lionels and I think it's one of the Barrymores. So that would suggest Lionel Barrymore. Elle Simpson? No, that's too obvious. Lisa S. But I don't think of Mr. Potter being like FDR.
Yeah, I don't think at all, because if anything, FDR was pushing programs that verged into, socialism. It's like the government should provide certain things for people and should come up with jobs programs, and like that's what dug us out of the Depression. So Potter's in ways the opposite of that.
I agree. That was going to be my conclusion as well, which is that, yeah, didn't FDR fight big banks and stuff? So yeah.
And in amidst the business doings, George has also got a personal life, a family life going on. He marries a woman named Mary, and she has just been dead set on George her entire life. Just her whole thing is, I'm going to marry George Bailey, which, wow, she is locked in.
Well, we see that from the perspective of George, so that's maybe not too surprising, but she definitely burns a candle for someone.
Oh yeah, carries a torch.
That's the one. I knew there was a phrase that had to do with fire for him. She's played by Donna Reed. And the interesting thing is there's this sort of like a insinuated love triangle with this other woman named Violet. It doesn't really stand out quite as much as some of the other stuff, but I think the idea is that Violet is kind of like supposed to be prettier, I guess. And she's like the sort of hot thing around town. And she ends up going to try and make it, I think suggested to be like New York or something like that, and doesn't quite make it. But she's kind of like the in another path not traveled, like A versus B for George. And he sticks with the hometown sweetheart.
Yeah, they're both into George. It's like Marianne and the movie star. Violet is blonde and Mary is brunette. But also they got the like old-timey haircuts. So I don't know, it's like it's just a little bit different than today.
Yeah. And I think Donna Reed is terrific in this movie. I mean, I think Stewart is obviously sensational, but I really think pretty much every role nails it. But every time I watch, I'm just impressed how there's really not that much written to the character, but she really brings a lot of life to Mary. Mary!
You want the moon?
Oh, I love that scene so much. That first of all, more movies should have as a central narrative item a Charleston contest. Like that should be the turning point for more movies, in my opinion, because that's when Mary and George like really fall for each other. Is Mary's recently graduated high school. They go to a dance, a local dance, and it's all these things that kind of interlock. It's like I said, it's more complicated than it seems because one of the things is George is very clever with like designing things and architecture and having an intuition for what will work. And his idea is you can have a pool underneath a gym floor and the gym floor will be retractable. And then you only need to have one building for your gym. I don't get this. This doesn't seem right to me, but apparently that's what they did. And so at this dance, a prankster who's mad at George for stealing Mary to dance with opens the floor and George and Mary fall in and it's supposed to ruin it, but then everybody goes along with it and it ends up just making it a better night for George and Mary. And this scene where they're like singing to each other and then he's kind of messing with Mary because her robe slips off and then she's hiding in the bush while he's like dangling the robe. And so presumably she's nude or near nude under without that robe. Just a very charming little vignette. And yeah.
And Jimmy Stewart says, "This is a very interesting situation." And so what I primarily still know It's a Wonderful Life from is it's intercut in Elmo Saves Christmas. And like at pivotal moments in the story, somebody will look at a TV that all the TVs in town are playing It's a Wonderful Life because they say that's all that plays at Christmas. But it's like they'll always have a thematically fitting line that comes across from the television set. And it's like a plot twist happens and suddenly you hear from the television, "This is a very interesting situation." Or, "Bert, Ernie, both of you were there on my wedding night, don't you remember?" And of course, Sesame Street has a Bert and an Ernie, and this movie does too.
Well, not just that, but they were named after them, right?
I think so. At least that's the common consensus.
Gotcha.
It's like there's a cop named Bert and a cab driver named Ernie. And at one point, Ernie even says, "Hey, you know, Bert the cop is over there." It's like, well, okay, I saw that he was a cop. Do you always call him Bert the cop? You guys seem to be pretty good friends.
Brian the filmmaker is over there. What would I be? Oh, that's like Over the Garden Wall, where the episode where they go to the tavern and they're asking him, "So what are you?" He's like, I don't know.
You're the pilgrim.
I'm the highwayman." I love the highwayman. Every episode in that is pretty good. That's one conclusion watching it every year is that I see the merits of every single episode. I used to like kind of have more of a ranking, but now I just find all of them charming.
Mary is like happy to be married to George, to live in this town, to be doing good, and George can't see the merits of it. George is always looking towards the horizon. One thing they do is there's this house in the town that I guess was abandoned at one point, got allowed to be decrepit, like a large house that then they're able to snap up cheaper than you might think because it's gone to seed.
And it's obviously a metaphor for the whole town because it's old fashioned and quaint, but through the power of human will and steadiness, it can be brought to vibrant life.
And so what I was thinking about this time was The Greatest Showman. Just that The Greatest Showman borrowed just hand and fist from this story because you got, the ambitious dreamer and he's got the wife and like her ambition is just that she knows about this house that's been abandoned and like let's fix this house up and that'll be the dream.
And the one thing I'd want to say is you said that he doesn't see the merits of this life, which I think you're right that he does always have his eye on the horizon. But I think it's important to note that he's not miserable. We see turning points for him. We see moments where he wants something else and can't have that. But he is a beloved and happy member of society, of the community. He has a family that seems very happy. And so he was not really depicted as a miserable person, I would say. Although he's definitely got unfulfilled hunger and angst within him.
Right. No, it's like the midlife crisis thing. It's like he's lived his life. He is in the process of living his life, but he's longing for more and doesn't really see everything he's got going for him. And then there's Uncle Billy. So Uncle Billy works at the Savings and Loan, worked with the father who previously ran it, now works with George, who's in charge. And Billy is a bumbler to a frustrating degree. And like what kicks off the final third of the film is there's this like sleight of hand bit where Billy's got this whole big cache of money. So okay, so George, by the way, has stayed in the town to keep the ship sailing straight, keep this small bank going, helping the community, and he's been able to see them through the Great Depression, see them through World War II, see them through all these hardships and stay afloat. And then Uncle Billy has this envelope with like $8,000 in it, and he hands it to Potter because he's confused. And it's like, oh, could you have just not done that? Like everything else, okay, the dad had a stroke or war broke out. Like these are things that could happen that would be beyond your control. Just don't even give the envelope to Uncle Billy in the first place. His track record is not good.
I think you're both right, but also it works for me. I mean, you're dead on right that like, yeah, don't give the guy who can't see left from right all of like your financial future. But at the same time, like part of this is that he's interdependent on this community that he is more ambitious than and sharper than, and these are just like ordinary flawed people who don't have the grand visions in life that he has. So like you're dependent upon people like this, as part of it. But it is frustrating as it's happening. It's like, dude, no. Yeah, come on, what are you doing? Don't give it to him. And then when he has it, it's like, Uncle Billy, you have literally one task in front of you. Can you not just, and you know how important it is, can you not just fulfill that? And then it's sad because he's like, I think a combination of like Alzheimer's and alcoholic. It's kind of not very clear, but he's like, I know I'm supposed to be doing something, but what am I supposed to be doing? I don't know. I'm going to leave the bank where I was going to make the deposit. And then he remembers it when he's back and he's like, I don't know where the money went. But yes, he like put it in a newspaper that he gave to Potter. And so now Potter has it and he sees an opportunity because it's the same day that, yeah, he's got to like pay down some debt or something. I don't know exactly what it is. But the point is pay this money or the bank is gone. And if the bank is gone, Potter owns the town.
I like the snow. So the second half of the film basically all takes place on this one day when George is going to face this crisis, this pivotal moment. And I don't know, I would have to review it, but much of the film up to this point didn't have snow. And then this day there's snow.
The cinematography, when the snow starts, it's like right when the dark stuff starts happening. It's just wonderful. It's got a little bit of a liminal quality to it. Like, I don't know, if you walk through the snow when it's dark or low light, it just feels like you're not really in normal space on the earth. And the cinematography manages to capture that. But yeah, the snow looks so good. I don't know, it's got to be fake. I don't know how they managed to get it to look so good.
Yeah, so at least according to the fun facts in the Amazon sidebar, which, when I see them, I like to bring them up. But it's said that up to this point, it was common for films to use cornflakes as snow, but they were too noisy. And so Frank Capra decided to use soap flakes, which then became the conventional choice. So who knows if that's true, but I like that story. I like that somebody said cornflakes and then, 10 years later or whatever, people were like, I don't know if this was the best choice. So George is short for money and he's got to pay back creditors to keep the business going, and he hasn't got the money. And it's like everything is crashing in around him for various reasons. There are a lot of little subplots. It's like every character has something going on, some part to play in the web of life. It's like that Netflix show 13 Reasons Why. It's like just a storm of all the bad things that could happen all at once. And so now what George decides he's got to do, like Death of a Salesman, is he's worth more to his family dead than alive. And so he's got to get out, and he's got to go throw himself off a bridge is the verdict.
Right, because basically he goes to Potter. So he's been nemesis with Potter, but he's like, Potter, I just need you to lend me a hand just this one time. Please just be human and help me. We've been in the same shared space for decades. Just help me this one time. And Potter says, well, what can you give as collateral? And he's like, it's this life insurance plan that I've saved. I forget, it's like $150 or something into, or maybe it's $500. I can't remember, but something. It's like pittance. But then if he dies, I think it's like, what was it, a $15,000 or $1,500 payout if he dies. And so then Potter, makes the observation, well, because you have so much little invested, you're worth more to your family dead than you are alive. And he's seeing this through dollar signs. You're worth more from a dollar perspective dead than alive because they would get the payout from it. And you're actively in debt,
Right.
And we get big eyes from Jimmy Stewart when he kind of realizes this. So yeah, dying is what he's got to do.
I was really appreciating all the reaction shots this time around watching it. Just any time Jimmy Stewart has to react to something, it's always good because it's mostly a cavalcade of bad things. For most of the runtime, it's like, oh, your father died, George. And it'll cut to his face and he'll have some little reaction in his eyes and his lips, and it's effective. He can act. So he meets Clarence at the bridge. Finally, the angel who we've heard talking but not seen yet shows up. And actually, Clarence jumps off the bridge. And what it made me wonder is it doesn't look like it's that far down. I don't know. It seems like you could survive this, but who can say? And so George kind of scrambles down the embankment and pulls Clarence out, and they start talking.
I was noting and appreciating that what's the first good thing that George does? And it's he dives in the water to save somebody. So this is kind of bringing him back to the very first thing that we learn about George, which is that he dove in the water to save somebody.
Good point. And George, now really not more than 20 minutes from the end, is saying what is on his mind is he wishes he'd never been born. Because part of the conversation, I guess, with Clarence is Clarence says, so you actually think killing yourself will make people happier? And George is like, well, maybe not, but maybe I should have just never been born. If I was never here, none of this would be going on. And so that's my wish. And Clarence kind of waves his hand, and now we're in Pottersville. They emerge out the door into this dark hellscape of the worst timeline, where what if George Bailey had never been born? So the way that it's structured is we've seen all the things set up the one way, and now bing, bang, boom, really, really fast, we see the bad version of what would have happened had he not been there to intervene. And so what are some things that we see?
Yeah, so this is the thrust of it, right? This is where it all comes together, because we see the cumulative effect of the positive impact that George has had on his community. So basically, Potter has turned Bedford Falls, I think is the name of the community, into a gambling and nightclub district where you go when you want to forget about life and you want to booze up. And many of the people he's helped through the years are in terrible places, terrible situations. His brother died. His uncle is in a mental institution. The bartender who he helped get a house is homeless and single instead of the father of a family in the community. And nobody recognizes him, which is heartbreaking because, he's built his whole life helping these people and being a part of their lives. And so it's devastating. And not just that, but strange. It's like, how could I not be a part of these people's lives? How could it just seems like existence isn't real? It's like a tragic void if the relationships that I have don't exist.
Right. And it's kind of a butterfly effect thing because, so remember, he saved his brother when the brother was just a kid. So because he didn't do that, the brother died. But also during the war, the brother saved a bunch of people he shot down a plane that was going to blow up a ship. And so now everybody who was on that ship died. So it snowballs.
So the movie's done such a good job of showing us how important Mary is in George's life.
Okay, I want to talk about Mary.
Yes.
Yes, let's both talk about Mary. This is the one that the second time I watched it in 2019, it was just glaring to me. It didn't bother me as much watching it this time. Okay, so what is Mary going to do without George? Well, throughout the movie, there's this other character who's there, whose name is Sam Wainwright, and he is horning in on Mary. He's interested in Mary, he's invested in Mary, he's after Mary. She doesn't like him as much because she likes George. She, from the beginning, says she's going to be with George from the time they're like 10 years old. But what if there's never a George? She might feel differently, I would think. And Sam Wainwright would still be there. And Sam Wainwright's story is that he goes to college and he gets really rich. He has a successful business and a factory. And on the night when George connects with Mary, he calls and he's like, "Hey, Mary, I'm thinking about this business idea. It could make us really rich." And okay, so if George is not there, the implication, which seems pretty strongly leaned into by the movie, is okay, here's this guy, Sam Wainwright. You've said his name 10 times. And okay, there's this slot ready for Mary to fill. And then the big twist, Scrooge looking at his tombstone moment of the George is Never Born act, that they really build to. The dramatic thing that Clarence says is, she never married and she's working at the library.
She's an old maid. That's the term.
She's an old maid and she's just about to close the library. What?
Okay, but you're right that it does seem like it's set up such that she would be with Sam, although she's never interested in Sam. So I don't know, would she have married someone she wasn't interested in? It does seem like it is setting up an alternate timeline where we're going to revisit that exactly like you said. Well, in all the other ones we saw, if George wasn't there at the right moment, this other thing would have happened. Well, if George wasn't there when Sam called and said, "Hey, I'm investing in plastics, come join me in this investment," that would be her fate. She would be like a rich woman. But it needs to be that Mary has a sad life, that Mary is alone, that this beautiful love and world that they've made doesn't get fulfilled if he's not there. There's a lot of talk about how Mary's something special. There's a quote I wrote down here. I want to pull it up that really struck me this time. I had remembered it, but I was just, it kind of lit up my heart when I heard it this time. What he says is, Mary is a good woman, quote, "the kind that'll help you find the answers, George." The importance of the Mary and George relationship. Maybe you could have found a way to rewrite it such that she was with someone else and had this totally different life, but it would just cut against the grain of what she is to this story and to George in this perspective. I mean, particularly, we're kind of taking this as objective reality, but if you think of it almost as a hallucination, it needs to be through the lens of George. And so her without him, would be the scariest thing of all. But I mean, it's an interesting point that it does feel like it sets us up for one thing and then pivots somewhere else, Yeah. Another thing I've heard is okay, does Pottersville actually look that bad? And B, in particular, what is wrong with Mary being single as an adult. She's beautiful. She's wearing glasses and got like her hair tied up. Like that's a valid look, you know? Is that really that sad a fate for her? Working at a library, that's not the worst fate that you could have.
I like actually laughed at that part the second time I watched it. Like, that's a little outlandish, but I can see your point too. I like that Clarence after this says, "Each man's life touches so many others, he leaves an awful hole.
Right. Yeah, I love that line.
Pieces are missing if you're not there." I do think when you talk about like historical counterfactuals and things, you wonder certain things probably would have happened even if specific individuals didn't do them at a specific moment in time. The history podcast I listen to talks about trends and forces. That once upon a time, the way history was taught was this great man theory that history moves when these dynamic individuals act at scale. It's like an Alexander the Great or a Napoleon. It's people like that who are great and terrible who cause history to happen. But then the kind of more nuanced take that's evolved is what the podcaster calls trends and forces. It's like societal forces lead to the opportunities that these individuals seize. And those opportunities would still be there, likely, even if these specific individuals weren't there in that moment. And maybe it falls to somebody else to do those things, but they would likely still get done. And so, I don't know. Depending on the pieces on the game board, the game's going to play out differently. I mean, that's the whole point. Would all of these things fall through with no George Bailey? Maybe. Maybe some things would happen different ways. I don't know that this is necessarily the only way that the dice fall, but it's interesting to think about.
Yeah, I definitely agree. But is this showing what would actually have happened if George wasn't there? From like a purely logical perspective, I completely agree with you. Like, yeah, I don't know, maybe somebody else would have dove in and saved the brother.
Maybe George took him to the pond, you know? It's like maybe they wouldn't even be on the pond if he wasn't there.
Exactly, yeah. It's kind of like the ending of La La Land to me, which is that it's not necessarily supposed to create like a true alternate reality. And in fact, it's shot so like expressionistically and different from everything else that it creates such a strong contrast that it feels unreal, you know? The section when he's unalived himself, which normally when you hear unalive on the internet today, it means different things. It means it's just a euphemism for kill. But here he really is unalived. He never was born.
Oh, that's true. Never to begin with.
I kind of think of it the same way as the end of the epilogue in La La Land, where if you try to piece together all of the things about what if they had done it differently, like the ripple effect would have been different, the setup would have been different, all these things would have been different, and so it wouldn't really look like this. But it shows the impact of each of the events and like the way that they really were turning points. And then when you add all of them up and take that away, it is, as you said, a whole that's gone there. So it doesn't bother me that it's not exactly like what I think would really happen if George hadn't been alive, because I think it just makes for such a good payoff on what George is becoming and like the lesson that he needs to learn. It dramatically works so well.
Yeah. And so George has seen the error of this wish and he begs for the second chance to return to his life, return to his family, even as bad as things are with this money being lost. And the next thing is Bert, the cop, comes around the corner but recognizes him now. Does know who George is, calls him by name.
And it's a great moment because when George had never been born, certain things changed. Like the hearing that he lost from when he fell in the lake and to save his brother, or jumped in the lake to save his brother. He had gotten in a fist fight earlier in his original life.
And so he gets to yell, "My mouth's bleeding, Bert!" Because that's the sign he's returned to life, like pinching yourself and knowing you're not in a dream.
Right. And then so like all these things kind of switch back. Yeah, and the snow again, so visually stark, starts falling, and that's when we know it's happened.
So George runs home through the streets, the snowy streets. I read that like this whole town basically was one big set, which is cool.
And just one of the iconic scenes in cinema. I mean, everything about the ending is one of the iconic scenes of cinema, but him running through the town and calling out all of the institutions, including the building and loan, and just the sheer joy that Jimmy Stewart is able to convey at being alive. Just the what a privilege, the miracle of life, the unlikelihood of us being our specific selves in our specific world, the improbability of this specific reality, even in its flawed nature, to celebrate that. And it's just wonderful.
Yeah. And it just builds and builds and builds in these last 5 minutes because he gets to the house, and who should be at the house but like everybody from the town, because they've heard, word has spread that they've defaulted, they've lost this money, and everybody in the town owes George a good turn. Because like during the Depression, he was giving out money when they couldn't back it up, and now this is their turn to pay back. And they've all got a little bit of money for George. I feel like even just all those batches of money, those little dribs and drabs, could add up to the 8,000. But then Sam Wainwright calls on the phone and gives him $25,000. It's like, geez, okay. But the message is that he is plugged in with the community to an extent he didn't even realize before, that he is a good guy, that he is vital to the community. He's the lifeblood of the town. And then Harry steps up and he says, "Here's to my brother George, the richest man in town."
Right, which is ironic because the thing that kicked it off was that he had no money and that was going to ruin him, and so now he's the richest man in town. And man, talk about an all-timer ending. This always, always, always makes me cry. This is like the kind of thing that makes me cry. Sad things don't really make me cry in movies, but like seeing this kind of love, it just kind of acknowledged and manifested is what gets me,
And everybody launches into singing what else but Auld Lang Syne.
Although it's Christmas, that's the New Year's song, but they're singing it at Christmas. But this is the iconic Auld Lang Syne singing. We've talked about my love of that song, and the podcast that I've mentioned is maybe my favorite podcast episode that John Green wrote and narrated. But this to me is the central Auld Lang Syne usage. But it's been in many great movies. We talked about The Apartment. We talked about When Harry Met Sally. Those are two big ones, and there have been plenty of others too.
And then the final thing is, so Clarence succeeded in his mission. That was the angel. He gets his wings, which was like the hallmark of you completed a mission. And he leaves George a note that says, "No man is a failure who has friends," which is a good line. I feel like is not quite as good a line as the "Here's to my brother George, the richest man in town." It's almost like tell us that first and then have Harry give the line. I don't know.
Right. But this ending is just an embarrassment of riches. Like so many great moments and lines and stuff. And one that you've made fun of me before, Brian, my go-to Jimmy Stewart line is when he's talking about Zuzu's pedals. It's Zuzu's pedals when he comes back in time and he pulls them out of his pockets.
So a couple things about that. You're right. I never gravitated to that line so much. Of course, I don't have children, but watching it this time, it gets emphasized several times. Zuzu's pedals. And it's not just Jimmy Stewart who says it. Clarence also says it. He's like, "You'll look in your jacket and they won't be there." And George says, "What?" He says, "Zuzu's pedals." And so obviously they connected some importance to that. And then I was Googling It's a Wonderful Life today, and a listing came up for like you could buy the soundtrack, and for whatever reason, in big letters on the listing for the soundtrack it said Zuzu's pedals. So okay, that has stuck with people. It washed off my back, but I won't yuck your yum if that's the line that sticks with you.
Well, it's just an evocative image. Like, yeah, I mean, being a parent, like being a parent gets brought up in this, but it's just like one star in the constellation of George Bailey's life here. I could have used maybe even more discussion of what his kids mean to him for that to have a little bit more impact, but it's almost kind of implicit. Like if you're a dad in this community, like that's kind of what brings it to life is the next generation and the people that you very much created and care for, and like what a wonderful thing a small human is, and this connection, this innocent, lovely, beautiful connection that you have between parent and child, being what she gave you, petals from a flower. Just a very powerful image. And then just the phrase Zuzu's petals. You know how they say like cellar door is the most beautiful phrase in the English language? Have you ever heard that before, Brian?
I've never heard that.
That's like a I've seen that reference multiple times. It's in Donnie Darko, for example, but it's like cellar door is the most aesthetically beautiful phrase in the English language. But for me, Zuzu's Petals is right up there too. It's a very pleasing collection of sounds and very evocative.
I'll have to think about that a little more. But yeah, the kids are not very much of the runtime at all. But why I think they're important is they're almost indicative of the baggage of having made this decision to settle in the town. It's like, the way that he views them at first is like the ball and chain. This is something that has accreted on me, accumulated, that's keeping me in one place. It's just representative of everything that I've had thrust on me that shows I'm not free, shows I'm not out in the world living my dream. But then he realizes this is the dream.
Right. I might phrase that a little bit differently. It's like, but I think you're on spot with the point of them. He cannot just go and be the guy because of them. You're exactly right about that. Like he cannot get up and leave his life anymore. And that's like the breaking point is the kids. Like, well, he couldn't really when he took the job. He couldn't really when he got married. He couldn't really when he bought the house that they rebuilt. And he absolutely can't when they have kids. Yeah. And to be honest, that is a real thing. It's like there are things in my life. I'm a dad with two kids that I cannot do because I am a dad. That closed some doors, even if it opened up a world of love that I now get to enjoy, you know?
Yeah. So we did it, Dan. We watched It's a Wonderful Life. We talked It's a Wonderful Life. And I was just thinking about a whole lot of different things watching this. This is a very thoughtful movie. Makes you think about your life. We've hit a lot of the talking points that I thought about. Just the tendrils that your life has, the butterfly effect. Also, I think at different points on the podcast, we've talked about the idea of pleasure plateaus. You had a term for it. This idea that at different stages of your life, people get used to the status quo of their life in a given moment. And it's like, even if they win the lottery, well, then you're going to get used to having that extra money. And it's like humans are good at adapting to things. It's like you can have changes in your life, and maybe, if it's a bad thing, maybe you grieve for 6 months, but then you can even get used to that status quo. And so I was thinking about that and how George he's actually in a good place, but in some ways he doesn't see it. He's more valuable to his community than he knows, than he appreciates. But he's also, all along, he's been building this reputation and connections with others. And it's like, people actually do like him, people do value him, and the community is better for having him. I was also thinking about the line, which I first appreciated because it's in the song in Hamilton when George Washington is delivering his farewell address. I guess originally it's from the Bible, about sitting in the shade of your own branch and fig tree. That you plant seeds, even metaphorical seeds, and they grow. And they have effects even after your own lifetime, often. So in the case of George Washington, it's like, I founded a country. And like the capital's named after me, but I'm going to be dead and buried here soon. But the country lives on. It doesn't have to be something that big and grand. It can be a town. It could be a house. It's like, I left an impact on the world that persists after me. That's the vine and fig tree.
It's a powerful image because it shows that the times we say yes do build something. They plant something. I like that image as well.
Speaking quickly of Bible verses, and I wanted to get Gavin's thoughts on this, is that in this film, so it starts out with people giving prayers. making prayers, saying prayers, asking for celestial intervention on George's behalf. And one of the prayers is, Joseph, Mary, and Jesus, please help us. And like, okay, Jesus and Mary get prayed to a whole lot. Rarely do I hear Joseph get prayed to. If this is Joseph, the like stepfather of Jesus. And then in all these conversations, like in between the flashbacks between God and Clarence, we're also hearing from Joseph, who is like Clarence's angel boss, I guess. And I was wondering, and maybe it's just Kuleshov in it, because that one prayer in the opener was asking for Joseph. Is this that Joseph? Is he an angel boss? Or is this the Joseph who had the Technicolor Dreamcoat? Or is this some other Joseph, Dan? And I don't know. And I want to hear Gavin's thoughts.
Joseph is a saint in the Catholic tradition, at least. So he would ostensibly be in heaven. So it could be him. But you're right. There's more than one Joseph in Christian history.
Okay, but back to the point, more on point, is I wanted to express my gratitude again to all the people who chipped in to support my film project and just support me in general, who I've made a connection with in life. And so that's Dan has given me a lot, Gavin has given me a lot, and just everybody who's in my life who I have, benefited from knowing and who I hope I have offered them some benefit. And I hope that if you're listening to this show that you enjoy it and that we're adding something to your life. This is all a web that we're building. And I wanted to express appreciation for that.
The web metaphor gets used actually negatively, interestingly, by Mr. Potter. But I think web is a good image here because, yeah, we all support each other. I like the phrase interdependence. It's not that, like, if any one thread breaks, that we are broken, that's codependence, but it's that by building this web, each person has potentially their own lives, their own independence, but connection to those other people makes it stronger and richer. And that's how I feel. I mean, my relationship with you, Brian, and my relationship with so many other people. Like, I completely agree that our lives are richer for the people who have been there for us. And some of it comes from those physical things, but just think about, like, I don't know, I think about all the things that concepts you've mentioned to me, movies you've made me watch or recommended to me, and how those have filtered the way that I view the world in one way or another, and have been things that I've shared with other people that I know. And so that has, like a butterfly flapping its wings, spread out like a hurricane to the world all around us. We're just a simple podcast. We're not even putting roofs over people's heads, but it's good to know that when you build something, even if it's a small thing, even if it's just a little diversion, that those are things that are part of this greater web of the Anthropocene, of the people who are humans living in this world and living this human experience, get to share with each other. And I'm glad to be a small part of it, bigger part of it for some people, smaller part of it for other people, and maybe just a distant dot on the horizon for other humans who I'll never cross paths with. But together, all of us have built this thing where all of us get to celebrate this world together. And I think It's a Wonderful Life really makes you feel that.
I agree. Just imagine, Dan, you'd never think about your jump span. If not for me, you wouldn't be doing your daily jump.
Absolutely not. No, that's just one thing.
It's the big thing, but no, I am glad to be here doing this, even 6 years in on our Christmas Carol episodes, because this is a good time of year. It's cold. You're inside, and so you turn inward and you think about what is the next step, and you evaluate and you make those New Year's resolutions, and you appreciate the fall harvest as you've taken it in, and you're with your friends and your family at Christmas time. So, Dan, let's do the big thing that we do, our raison d'etre. Is it good?
Before we do that, Brian, I know we're running long here. I need to sign off not too long, but I think given that this is in an episode about A Christmas Carol, I'd like to at least opine a little on how this relates to A Christmas Carol, because I think
Oh,
it
good.
does.
Please.
So some of the imagery is there. I really was thinking about it this time because we were viewing it in this context. Like, I mean, instead of a ghost, you have an angel coming and speaking to George. And in some ways, it's like Mr. Potter is kind of the Scrooge character, you know? He doesn't really learn his way. It's almost like what if Fred had never been born? But it kind of hits on similar themes, but just from a totally different angle. Because instead of a person who hasn't done these things to care for the world, we see someone who has, but then if we take it away in the alternate world, you know? So, like in both cases, we see this vision of things being sad, but instead of someone who hasn't fulfilled it being inspired to, it's someone who has lived it, but hasn't realized the value of it, seeing the value of it. So it's like a remix on it, but it's hitting on similar themes of money itself is not important except as a tool to bring the world together and bring love out into the world.
It's also kind of like the Ghostbusters one that we watched last year, where what if Scrooge never met the ghost because the Ghostbusters busted them? And you get the horrible timeline.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. And you also get visions of the past, the present, and like a dark future of sorts, even though it's really like a alternate reality rather than a future. But like what would happen if this bad thing, this darkness came to pass, you know? So it still kind of has that structure. I really noticed there's like a grave, and in this case, instead of his own grave, it's his brother's grave. And we have like a dark spookiness to the way that it's shot, the way that you do with Christmas Yet to Come. And another thing that really struck me that I don't know if we've actually talked about in our 6 years is that in some ways it's almost a Christian story, like a Christ story specifically, because you have a death in the Christmas Carol. It's Scrooge literally sees his death and then he comes back to life, a resurrection, and celebrates a day. Well, like Easter, like Jesus coming back to life. And in this case, you have that too. It's George ceases to exist. He dies in a certain way. And then he comes back to life in a resurrection and a joyous celebration of love. And that was striking me as well. But I think in the sense that it's like a speculative story that makes you realize the way that you can and should devote your life to other people is really kind of what brings, and it's centered around Christmas. That's the way that I see them as being tied together. And I don't know whether the filmmakers were like explicitly invoking A Christmas Carol, but I have to suspect they might have been, or at least inadvertently were. But I do think there's a lot that ties it together. And I think there are other alternate Christmas carols you could bring in, like Groundhog Day is one, for example. There was another one I was thinking of earlier. I can't remember what it was, but I think Groundhog Day is another one that has a lot of Christmas Carol themes and feeling to it. It's the long tail of A Christmas Carol, Brian.
Indeed. It's definitely had an impact. It's a Wonderful Life. I mean, A Christmas Carol also, but It's a Wonderful Life just nods and references in pop culture that for a long time I never realized, oh, that's from It's a Wonderful Life. One is this representation of God as like a constellation that flashes when he talks. There's an episode of Futurama that's about God, and God is depicted this way, where it's like the voice speaks and the stars twinkle. Very similar to how it's shown here.
But I do think it's apt to bring them together. And Brian, you talked a lot about how this was making you think about it, and you've been thinking about like what's next for you. Did it help you get insight? Is there anything that you want to or would be comfortable sharing about what it made you feel about your life and what's next?
Just that I'm in a brighter headspace now than I was a few weeks ago.
Okay.
And there are various reasons for that, but I'm feeling jollier now. I'm more in the spirit.
Okay.
So we'll see what unfolds next. The film is getting done. Will get done. I owe everybody an update. It's coming soon. And then what's next, I don't know yet. Probably I'll continue teaching, at least for the short term. And so, hey, we'll be checking in every week, so you'll hear what's next. Just stay tuned.
And I'm looking forward to being a part of it, whatever it is, Brian, or at least hearing about it.
Thanks. You too, Dan.
So I will rate is It's a Wonderful Life from 1946 good. I mean, come on. Yeah, it's good. It's very good. It's exceptionally good. It's a masterpiece. It's a tour de good 8 out of 8 masterpiece. It's one of my favorite movies. It's one of a small handful of movies that I view as like a guiding text in my life. Rudy is another one, for example, where it kind of taught me a little bit about like what do I think is important in the way that we act and how that shapes my life and the life of people around me. Rudy was more interior. This one is more about that interdependence, and it's just a absolutely lovely story that's so emotionally effective. And I really was thinking about it. There's only one thing I don't like in this, and I don't like the little war montage. It kind of like, I guess he had to in 1946, if you're going to depict an all-American, like have this, he was helping the war effort, even though he wasn't a soldier. He and Mary sold war bonds and were good helpers of the U.S. effort. It just kind of jars me a little bit. That was like the one thing where I was like, oh, I don't know if it needs to be like this. But I think this is one of the great screenplays. It's more complicated than you realize. It could flow so well. Maybe I've just seen it so many times that I kind of know it and I feel like it flows well. But I really do think all the pieces feed together so that you, again, it adds up at the end, that you feel all of them kind of come cresting together. Yeah, you get a lot of like, oh, at the last minute, something bad happens to him. He gets sucked away from his dreams. That's maybe repetitive. I don't know. But I didn't bother me as much this time because each one is like a little different in character and texture. Just one of the great performances, in addition to one of the great screenplays. I mean, Jimmy Stewart, he's himself, but like he hits the high and low emotions that you need. The direction and filmmaking by Capra is just phenomenal. He fills it with this really human spirit. And then I'm just always so struck when I get to the end how like we get what feels like a kind of a normal reality, very well made reality, but then when it gets upended visually, just in the look of it alone, you totally get that we're in some alien dimension, you know? And that's where it really you can like take screen caps of it and post it, be like, oh, that's just beautiful filmmaking by Capra, just world-class stuff. It's a masterpiece. It's in my top 10 movies of all time. I don't think that would shake if I were to re-rank again. I had it at number 9 when we did our top 100 in 2022. Also, shout out to Mitch, who was in the recording last week, the episode from last week. I don't know if we mentioned this, but he recently counted down his 25 favorite movies on his podcast and had It's a Wonderful Life at number 1. And he talked about how a turning point in his life was when he stopped being an Into the Wild man and started being an It's a Wonderful Life man, or at least that's how he was orienting his life. We should talk about Into the Wild at some point, Brian. I think that would be an interesting one.
Definitely. We'd have stuff to talk about. And yeah, wow, number 1. Join our Discord, and I'm sure Mitch will say more about why he loves It's a Wonderful Life so much. I also love this movie. I'm going to give this an 8 out of 8 masterpiece rating because it's just a well-oiled machine. I mean, it works really well, every part of it. I was appreciating the lighting this time, like when George is up on the bridge and the way the snow is hitting the water. The Amazon sidebar said actually it was 90 degrees that day, but they did a really good job of making it seem like it's winter and it's cold.
Oh, for sure.
We're going to talk about a movie next week where I jumped the gun, and because again the recordings got close together this time, they're kind of bunched a little bit, and so I watched the next movie, and that's a case where I could tell that it was a hot day. Like, it's supposed to be a Christmas movie, but I'm sure they filmed this in the summertime. I never had that illusion broken in It's a Wonderful Life.
No, I didn't know that. That's crazy.
And it's like all the characters have something to do, and it plays into the idea that this is a real lived life. That life is what happens to you when you're busy making other plans, and he's here and he's living it, and he's in the thick of it. And the message is that you too, viewer, are living a life. And think about your life and appreciate your life, because you don't know who you're affecting. And chances are it's a lot of people.
Brian, one last thing I want to say is when we get that culmination that you're speaking about, the ending, it's up there for the greatest endings of any movie for me. I mean, like probably this and Toy Story 3 are my number one and number two in some order. I mean, I also have like Rudy and Shawshank Redemption and The Usual Suspects up there, but that would be a top five. It's like to come up with what are our five favorite movie endings and really think through it and rank it, because this one makes me cry every single time, and I just adore the way that it culminates. But sorry to interrupt your rating with one additional thought there, Brian.
No, that's good. That's what we're here for, to give our thoughts, give our feelings, say what's on our heart, as Delilah says on the Christmas radio.
Love Delilah.
Some other good movies that I wanted to shout out that tell this story of a humble life, just a community figure who doesn't think they're making a big splash, but then turns out that they have carved their niche in the edifice of time, as the dad says in Mary Poppins. A man has dreams of walking with giants to carve his niche in the edifice of time. So these movies that I was thinking of are Follow Me Boys, which was a Disney movie from the 60s about a scoutmaster, and Mr. Holland's Opus from the 90s, which is about a band teacher. But it's like, especially if you work with young people in those instances, and you have classes of people coming in, it's like each semester or whatever, each year of the scout troop, you're affecting like 20 people. And just think about how many people they're affecting. And it's like, if you're a teacher or one of these authority figures who works with youth, that you're actually touching way more lives than you might think. So if you're looking for a movie like that, that'll make you cry, and you've seen It's a Wonderful Life too many times already, check out Follow Me Boys or Mr. Holland's Opus.
That sounds like me.
If you like. Yeah. Consider those.
RIYL. Yeah. Shout out Colton.
Shout out Colton indeed. I'm sure we'll talk to Colton again before too long. But what is immediately next, Dan? Where will we be going? What will we be doing and watching?
Yeah, so what we have planned is another guest who's never appeared on the podcast. Just like last week, we had a new guest, and that is Brennan Klein, who has come up on the podcast many times. He's a podcast host at the Alternate Ending website and podcast. He has his own blog that I quite enjoy, where he writes mainly about slashers and does some awesome end of year recaps. He writes for, I think, Screen Rant and a couple of other sites. We can bring this up with him. He had a funny article recently, which was like the top 8 full frontal male nudity scenes in horror movies or something like that, which was making me laugh. Looking forward to talking with Brennan, and we are actually not going to be talking about a slasher or a horror movie, but a Lifetime movie, Hallmark-like movie. And I wrote down the name. I don't even remember what it's called. It's a generic holiday thing, but it's got some weird flavors and elements to it that Brennan had a hunch would make for interesting conversation. So we'll see if that bears fruit. And do you know the name of it, Brian?
It's called Dear Christmas, and it's the one that's about a podcast.
There you go. That's one thing about it. So there you go. Dear Christmas, I think from 2020. So looking forward to that. Thank you, Brian. I really like our Christmas Carol episodes, and I absolutely love It's a Wonderful Life as well. Glad to have another 16 Club member, an 8 and an 8. And I hope you have a wonderful December, Brian, and listeners.
Thank you, Dan. I wish you the same, you and yours, because it's a wonderful life.
Indeed.
Bye, everybody.